Sometimes games just sink their hooks into you in ways you don't expect. Sure, we all love a deep narrative or high-end graphics, but there are times when all we really want is something we can't put down. In this video, I will list down some of the games that are surprisingly addictive. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Kicking off this list, we have Slay the Spire. Okay, so Slay the Spire is one of those games that hooks you without you even realizing it. Deck building plus roguelike mechanics? It seems pretty niche, right? Except the thing is, it works. Every run feels like this delicate puzzle. You're just trying to pull the right cards, land the right relics, and power up your deck into some unbeatable combo. But even when your strategy crumbles in the face of bad luck or an impossible boss, the temptation of another try is irresistible. There's something about those first few floors, when you're building up your deck from junk cards, that brings you right back in. And then there's the constant risk-reward balance. Do you pick the safe route and avoid threat-heavy encounters, or gamble a bit and go for big rewards? It's honestly wild how different each run can feel. What really gets me is how chill it all seems at first. It's just you and these cards. But then a couple hours pass and you realize you've been absorbed in creating another unstoppable deck. That's kind of Slay the Spire's secret sauce, I think. The moment you pull off a perfect synergy and melt a boss's health bar feels earned. It's the tension, the pressure to nail that last fight, which makes it endlessly replayable. And guess what? This game is one of those games on Steam with a lot of positive response. Feel free to check it out right now. Next up, we have Hades. Fast, fluid, and fun. That's Hades in a nutshell. It's the type of game that thrives on momentum. From the first run, you feel like you're barely in control, just dodging, striking, and casting like some kind of rogue warrior on autopilot. But somehow, it sticks to you, even after deaths. Especially after deaths, honestly. The gameplay loop is so tightly constructed that dying doesn't feel like an endgame. It feels like you're getting a chance to reset and try out new builds. The way Hades manages to combine a roguelike with a real narrative arc is clever. Who'd have thought a game with so much repetition could have such a compelling storyline? Every character interaction, every upgrade from the gods, it all weaves together to keep you engaged. Even simple changes like switching to a new weapon can shift your entire playstyle, and that's where the magic lives. You keep coming back to see what combo of boons and abilities you'll get this time. Shout out to the chaos of Athena's deflect mechanic or Dionysus's poison damage stacking up over time. It feels so crunchy in the heat of battle. And then there's Zagreus himself. The witty dialogue and character depth give the combat structure so much more meaning. What's wild is how they use every mechanic, every shard of the game to tell a story about rebellion and family. At its heart, Hades hooks you not just with the action, but with Zagreus' unyielding determination. You're invested in his journey just as much as you are in mastering the combat. That's why you can't put it down. Loop Hero. Now, this one came out of nowhere for me. I mean, we're talking about a game where you don't even control the hero. Loop Hero flips the power dynamic. It's less about controlling your character and more about controlling the world around them, and that's kind of brilliant. Instead of commanding the hero, your job is to piece together the path, laying down enemies, mountains, and villages in just the right spaces. There's something really meditative about it. You sit back, watch the hero do their thing, and it feels satisfying in a relaxing way, like putting together pieces of a puzzle but still holding on to this beautiful tension. Is the hero strong enough to survive the loop? Can you add more enemies, or are you pushing them too far? It's also about patience, you know? You can't rush to win, you have to let the system you've built play itself out, and that makes each loop feel like this strange experiment. Plus, the progression is super satisfying. Watching your little hero become more powerful with each piece of gear they find, each new loop they endure, there's this comforting rhythm. And yeah, the retro pixel art style adds a lot to the charm. It's so simple, yet the atmosphere just sucks you into its strange, looping world. Loop Hero is one of those games where time just kind of evaporates. You play for a bit, tweaking and tinkering, then suddenly it's hours later and you're stuck thinking, maybe just one more loop.
My sweet brother. What have you done?
Mary! Oh, no! Mary!
Next up is Vampyr. You wouldn't expect a vampire RPG to sink its teeth into you like Vampyr does, right? It's slow, brooding, and drenched in atmosphere, like damp London streets, murder in the fog, gothic mansion kind of atmosphere. You play as Dr. Jonathan Reed, torn between these two conflicting urges, saving lives or, devouring them for your own survival. What really pulls you in is that morality system. It's not black and white. Every NPC has a whole life, right? Every one of them feels like a complete human with backstories and connections to the rest of the world. Do you kill that sickly nurse to power up for a tough fight? Or do you let her live, knowing that she's vital to a bigger web of story at play? These decisions matter, mostly because humanity itself starts to slip away each time you feed. And maybe that's where it gets addictive. The constant push and pull. How far can you go before completely giving in to your vampiric nature without losing the thread of who Dr. Reed is? And I haven't even mentioned the combat, which is more fluid than you'd expect. It's not flashy, more about timing and managing resources like stamina and blood. All of these systems working together, combat, dialogue, the branching choices, they form this treadmill of decisions that weighs on you, keeping you playing just to see where it all ends up. The pull of power, mixed with that moral dilemma, makes Vampyr strangely hard to walk away from. Deep Rock Galactic. Alright, so the thing about Deep Rock Galactic is it has this perfect blend of chaos and camaraderie that makes it ridiculously addictive. You're a squad of space dwarves, dropped into these gorgeous yet procedurally generated caves, and your one job is to mine resources while fending off waves of hungry alien bugs. Sounds straightforward, right? Until you're deep in an underground labyrinth and a horde comes barreling at you from every angle. Your flashlight's flickering and someone's yelling, "Where's the explosives?" And that's where this game really shines, the teamwork. Each of the 4 dwarves has a specific class, like gunner, engineer, or scout, and the way they interact creates this dependency that's oddly satisfying. Yeah, that kind of feeling. You're not just charging through caves solo, you need your team to make it. Whether you're ziplining across a chasm, lighting dark tunnels with flares, or tunneling through a mountain, the real-time problem solving makes every mission feel fresh. The procedural generation keeps each cave layout feeling new, which honestly keeps your brain engaged in that one more mission trap. You think, okay, we've got the flow down, but the next mission completely switches up the variables, hazards, enemy types, objectives, so you're always on your toes. And the dwarves themselves, absolute charm machines. They're gruff, full of ridiculous banter, and always ready to celebrate with a cold one after a mission. The camaraderie between your team and the satisfaction of digging through alien-soaked rock mountains is, quite frankly, addictive. Next up, we have Griftlands. So, if you liked Slay the Spire, then Griftlands is gonna pull you in quick, but for totally different reasons. Sure, it's another deck builder, but what makes Griftlands unique isn't just the combat. It's how it weaves in negotiation and storytelling. You're not just throwing punches or cards at enemies, you're also using words as literal weapons. The game has this cool system where you can talk or fight your way out of situations by building completely separate decks for each style. Negotiation becomes this whole game of influence. Stack up your verbal attacks until your opponent crumbles under your brilliant argument. It's like adding a layer of chess to Slay the Spire's deck strategy. I've got to say, handling both combat and conversation decks gives you that little just one more try itch. Because, really, who wouldn't want to see if you can sweet talk the next hostile into joining your side, rather than going full-on combat mode? Then there's the branching narrative, which feels super organic. The choices you make ripple outward, slightly shifting the landscape for your character and altering relationships with NPCs. Different from Slay the Spire, which is all about the journey upward, Griftlands feels more rooted in people. You build alliances or straight up make enemies with your words, which is oddly satisfying. The roguelike nature mixed with its narrative focus makes Griftlands stand out. You're always curious where the next choice will lead, and whether your deck will back you up when things get tense. The Outer Worlds. Now, here's the thing. The Outer Worlds might look like your standard space RPG on the surface. You know, big open planets, dialogue trees, some gunplay, pretty familiar territory. But the moment you start really diving into those dialogue choices, that's where it hits different. It's not just the freedom of choice, it's how those choices are presented. The dry, sarcastic wit that weaves through almost every conversation keeps you locked in. Honestly, the humor alone could carry this game. You know the people behind the Outer Worlds, Obsidian, right? The same minds who brought us Fallout New Vegas. And they brought that same magic here. Factions that actually feel dynamic, NPCs with memorable quirks instead of throwaway lines, and those quirky side quests, it's like they crafted a world where even the minor errands have this charm that keeps pulling you off the main path. I mean, the game lets you solve problems in the most ridiculous ways. Want to talk your way out of a firefight? Convince some corporate hack to double-cross their own company, or just go on a wild tangent about the evils of capitalism? You can do that and it feels good. And don't even get me started on companion interactions. Parvati, she's honestly one of the most relatable characters I've come across in a while. You actually enjoy spending time with your crew, which makes exploring the outer stretches of space feel less like a grind and more like, I don't know, a bizarre road trip with friends. And yeah, it was all fun.
At 2 Point Hospital, over 52% of our patients believe they leave healthier than when they arrived. Our precisely calibrated equipment is operated by compassionate healthcare practitioners.
2 Point Hospital. There's something about 2 Point Hospital that just shouldn't work, right? I mean, you're managing a hospital, typically not the most fun or relaxing subject matter. But then, it's full of these ridiculous diseases and over-the-top remedies, and before you know it, you're glued to the screen, trying to cure someone of cubism or lightheadedness, literal light bulbs for heads. It's like Theme Hospital grew up, embraced its absurdity, and got a modern makeover. There's this delicate balance between chaos and control. You're always micromanaging, hiring staff, training doctors, building rooms, but somehow it never feels like a chore. Instead, it's got that same addictive loop that management sims should have. You're constantly juggling. 1 second, you're trying to make your patients happy, and the next, you're cramming in more toilets because somehow a queue's already forming. And the moment you think things are under control, a new epidemic turns the hospital upside down. It's not like it's just mindless fun either. There's real strategy here. You've got to design your hospital flow to minimize waiting times, keep your staff happy and trained, and push out as many cures as possible. The more you play, the more the challenge feels rewarding rather than overwhelming, and you end up getting attached to your staff. Like, there's always that one janitor who just doesn't quit, fixing machines day and night. The game does such a good job of making sure you're never bored. Something's always happening, and no matter how silly things get, you can't help but click the next level just to see which ridiculous illness or hospital disaster you'll have to solve next. Next up, we have Astroneer. There's something about Astroneer that drags you in with this mellow, almost zen-like quality, and then suddenly you're 4 hours deep, reshaping an entire planet. It starts out so simply. You land on a colorful, low-poly world and begin scavenging resources. But it's that combination of freedom and curiosity that keeps you hooked. The way terrain just morphs and builds around you, like the entire planet is clay in your hands, makes exploration feel limitless. You're not following strict quests or anything, you're just out there, seeing how far you can go, what you can build. The base building is what reeled me in the most. You start constructing small modules, oxygen tethers, then suddenly it grows into this sprawling sci-fi base before you even realize how big it is. I love how the game invites you to figure everything out yourself. There's a weird satisfaction in stringing those tethers out into the distance and knowing your oxygen supply is connected to your base, like you're literally creating your lifeline as you wander farther from safety. Plus, that sense of scale, the feeling when you hop into a rover for the first time and just go off into the wild, is something else. Where Astroneer really shines, though, is its casual pacing. You're free to just be curious. Endlessly satisfying, every new resource or tech unlock gives you that dopamine hit. Hours melt away as you carve out tunnels or build solar arrays. It's a game where the journey, not the destination, really gets into your bones.
We're coming up on Portia.
Whoa, that looks beautiful!
What are you gonna do there? Ruin diving?
Next on the list is My Time at Portia. If you've played Stardew Valley or Animal Crossing, you'll feel right at home with My Time at Portia, but it's got its own little flavor that just makes it stand out. There's this really wholesome, inviting charm to the whole world that reminds me of those cartoons you couldn't help but binge watch as a kid. You're not just farming or building, you're crafting, exploring ruins, battling enemies on the side, all while upgrading your workshop to be this close to perfection. There's just so much to do, and somehow none of it feels like busy work. The unique part is how well everything feeds into each other. Like, you're building up your workshop to fulfill commissions from the townspeople, but at the same time, you're mining for resources, fighting critters in the ruins, and fostering friendships. And it's all wrapped in this charming but cute world. I think that's kind of the secret sauce here. It has the depth of a life sim, yet it's still lighthearted at its core. The characters, even the town itself, feel alive. You've got this sense of community happening around you, and helping out just sucks you in without realizing it. And the crafting loop, so satisfying. Turning raw materials into a gleaming new machine or furniture for your home, there's just something peaceful and addictive about that process. On top of that, it gives you that just one more day feeling. You think you're logging on for a bit to build a piece of furniture, but then an hour later, you're deep in commissions for the town, solving mysteries in the ruins, and tending to your farm. Time basically evaporates in Portia's world because it rewards your effort at every step. Next up, we have Oxygen Not Included. Okay, Oxygen Not Included is a straight-up masterclass in deceptive complexity. On the surface, it feels like a little space colony sim, right? Looks cute, seems simple. Then, before you know it, you're knee-deep in managing oxygen levels, water pressure, duplicant stress, and food shortages. And your brain's firing on overtime. What's wild is how nothing's ever as straightforward as you'd think. Sure, you're building toilets so your duplicants don't get sick, but then that produces polluted water. So now you've got to figure out how to filter it. And that's not even the real issue, because hey, guess what? You forgot to monitor your oxygen supply, and now half your base is suffocating. The balancing act becomes insanely addictive as you try to set up self-sustaining systems while keeping your duplicants alive. The thing that really hooks me is that you're applying real-world science here. Thermodynamics, gas diffusion, calorie management, these aren't just background mechanics. They're everything you'll need to master. This game rewards curiosity and experimentation in a way few games do. You'll find yourself redesigning entire systems on the fly, zoning out like, okay, this time I'll manage heat better. And when you do get things right, oh, the relief is incredible. That constant feeling of being on the edge of disaster gives the game its edge. And the moments when your colony actually starts to thrive against all odds are when you realize how hooked you've gotten. There's always something to tweak, improve, over-engineer. And that's what keeps you attached to the game for hours longer than you expected. PowerWash Simulator. This one, it's kind of surprising, right? PowerWash Simulator sounds like something you'd fire up as a joke, but within minutes you're elbow deep in grime, washing away years of fictional dirt from patios, playgrounds, and old RVs, and straight up not wanting to stop. There's just something so satisfying about seeing the dirt slowly disappear under the sheer force of that spray. It's the ultimate cleanup fantasy, and it's relaxing in this almost hypnotic way. It's a game of patience too. You turn on that power washer and start meticulously cleaning tiny spots of filth just because leaving behind a smudge feels wrong. And I think that's the charm. There's no pressure, no ticking clock, no enemies. It's you versus dirt. It's got this sensory feedback loop where you're just locked into the sound of the high-powered spritz. And as the layers of grime melt away, you get this small dopamine hit every time you reveal those clean, shiny surfaces. And let's be real, it's probably one of the most peaceful ways to tune out the rest of the world. You get absorbed in the process, and suddenly you've spent half the day washing away the layers of a garden patio that nobody will ever visit. You'll keep at it simply because it feels right. There's also this weird communal thing happening here too. I've seen entire Reddit threads dedicated to sharing cleaning methods. It's just weirdly communal and comforting in the best possible sense. Up next is Cult of the Lamb. Alright, now Cult of the Lamb feels like something straight out of a fever dream. You're this adorable little lamb, forced to start a cult to repay a demon that saved your life, and everything spirals down from there. It's this weird, playful mashup of genres. It's part roguelike dungeon crawler, part resource management sim. Oddly enough, the contrast between leading your followers and going on these intense dungeon runs makes the game dangerously hard to step away from. The big hook here is how it combines the dark and cute in ways you wouldn't expect. You're wandering these dungeons, picking off enemies, collecting resources, and then you return to your commune, where your followers are either praising you or secretly planning your downfall. It's the balance between two very different states of mind, right? Like, one minute you're in a boss fight with some horrific monstrosity. The next, you're back in your cult's village, tending to crops, feeding your followers, or performing rituals to keep your flock happy. The layers of management can surprisingly weigh down on you as you start sacrificing followers for the greater good or holding them back from becoming dissenters. I swear, you get so involved in the obscure little rules of your cult, it becomes less of an action game and more like keeping a weird little pet society in check. For me, the unpredictability is what keeps Cult of the Lamb engaging. You never quite know how things are going to pan out, and somehow that mix between chaotic combat and wholesome, eerie town management just works. It's easily the sort of game where you think, I'll just do one more ritual and then I'll stop, but it just keeps going. If you haven't checked out this game yet, you definitely should.
First, you will need to survive the yard against terrifying insects.
Next up is Grounded. Grounded really hits different when you realize it's a survival game where the entire world is just your backyard. Only it's twisted because you've been shrunk down to the size of an ant. So suddenly, everyday objects, blades of grass, soda cans, even a baseball, become these towering monuments, while harmless critters like ladybugs and ants, well, they're now massive and can go from cute to terrifying in seconds. That's part of what keeps Grounded so hard to put down. It's not just a survival game, it's an exercise in rediscovering something familiar from a totally different angle. Building your first base underneath a giant clover or planting a flag at the top of a juice box feels epic because it feels earned. The scale of the world is crazy, and even the smallest trip a few meters from your camp can feel like a huge expedition, especially when you hear the familiar, spine-chilling skitter of spiders nearby. Every inch forward comes with this tension. Do you keep pushing into unknown territory for that rare resource or head back to the safety of the base? Multiplayer juices up the gameplay loop here. There's this undeniable sense of teamwork when you're playing with friends, working together to craft shelters out of grass and clovers, fend off armies of ants, or venture into the deeper, more hostile zones. It's like your classic backyard adventure fantasy paired with the tension of survival. Oh, and the creature design, genius. You've got wolf spiders and mosquitoes that turn into full-on boss battles simply by existing near them. Grounded locks you in with that nostalgic, I know this backyard, but pulls you into something way more dangerous. And that's why it's so fun. You think you're familiar with the world, until it flips on you fast. Neon White is the kind of game that's both chaotic and precise. Two things that shouldn't go hand in hand but somehow do here. It's a speedrunning first-person shooter and a platformer, with the whole thing drenched in neon aesthetic and anime styling. You're some kind of assassin trying to ascend a heavenly purge by eliminating demons. But honestly, the plot ends up being secondary to the core feel of the game, flying through levels as quickly as possible, using weapons as mobility tools. What grabs you so quickly is how fluid everything is. The game is about mastering momentum. Grab a card, which stands for a weapon, dump the weapon's ability to perform wild acrobatics or insane jumps, and zip through the air while dodging enemies and smashing through platforms, all in one smooth motion. It pulls you in because every level demands you go just a little bit faster. You're hooked even after clearing a level because now you want to do it better. The structure turns 1-minute levels into an hour-long obsession of refining your run. It's like someone weaponized the feeling of just one more try. There's this urge to nail every shortcut, to shave just a few seconds off your time. It reminds me of old-school arcade games where you were constantly chasing a score. Except here, it's a flow state in fast forward, and that perfectly timed jump is the reward itself. The leaderboard system keeps it competitive too. You start caring about split seconds without realizing it. The combination of parkour, crazy demon battles, and that almost ethereal speed make Neon White something special. Every run is addictive because every time you play, you feel like you can always go just a little faster. Next up is Pikmin 4. It's wild how Pikmin 4 can take something as mundane as managing a group of alien plant people and turn it into this deeply satisfying rescue strategy. Nintendo nailed it once again with the formula here. It looks all cute and whimsical, but within that approachable exterior lies this intricate puzzle strategy game. You're back to crash-landed planet exploration, commanding an army of tiny Pikmin to gather resources, fight massive bugs, and retrieve ship parts. Each new type of Pikmin adds another layer of strategy. You get your heavy-lifting purple Pikmin, or the red ones that are straight up unbothered by fire. The pacing keeps you in this almost meditative loop, sending your Pikmin to carry loot back to the ship while you lead the others through some combat situation or environmental hazard. What really struck me this time around is how each day in-game matters. Time's ticking down, and you've got to balance gathering resources versus pushing deeper into unknown areas, where threatening creatures like the night spiders can easily wipe out entire squads of Pikmin if you haven't prepared. There's this constant balancing act of risk and reward, and the pressure to succeed each day means you're always clicking through tasks, planning what to accomplish next. There's something about controlling these tiny creatures that constantly nudges you to keep playing. Whether you're cleaning up a level of treasures or squeezing in that final resource run before the day ends, Pikmin 4 keeps feeding your brain in the most charming and strategic way possible. Unfortunately, this game is only available on Switch, so if you have a Nintendo Switch, you better check this one out.
Where's Mari?
A fascinating reunion, but that will have to wait. The ceremony is soon to commence.
Ghostwire Tokyo. There's something immediately absorbing about Ghostwire Tokyo. The city of Tokyo, that normally bustling, neon-soaked playground, feels unnervingly empty. No cars, no crowds, just an eerie quiet. Until you notice the spirits. It's an open world, but not in the traditional sense. Instead of expansive wilderness or enemy-filled ruins, it's an urban sprawl turned ghost town. The streets echo with strange whispers, and there's this creeping tension everywhere you go. Combat-wise, it's different from anything else. You're not wielding swords or guns, you're channeling elemental magic straight from your hands. The way it blends traditional Japanese spiritualism with modern cityscapes is just cool. Think wind blasts, fireballs, pure energy that you flow through intricate hand signs, kind of like weaving spells in midair. There's this tactile satisfaction in binding your enemies with spiritual threads after wearing them down, and it really feels like you're connecting directly to their energy. What I didn't expect was just how rewarding the exploration would be. You're cleansing Torii gates to lift the fog that's blanketing the city, and each cleared section unlocks more of these haunted, mysterious streets. But here's something I appreciated. They didn't fill the world with mindless side quests. Instead, each section you enter feels like it matters. From eerie yokai encounters to hidden shrines, the city feels haunted by stories that want to be uncovered. The folklore elements are what keep this game fresh too. You're essentially piecing together legends and urban ghost stories, merging the supernatural with the everyday. It's the weird beauty of this world that keeps you coming back, constantly wanting to uncover the next hidden spirit or cleanse the next part of the city.
Are you ready for a new operation?
Good timing. Just lost a tail.
Do you require support?
Nah, they're long gone. Let's go.
Next on the list, we have Watch Dogs Legion. So this game takes the traditional open world formula and flips it in a way that feels pretty brave. No singular protagonist here. Instead, you have the entire city of London to recruit from. Literally, everyone is a potential character you can bring into DedSec. That's the part that grabs hold of you without you realizing it. You scan the crowd and go, that person's got a neat skill, or this grandma can hack drones. And before you know it, you've built this eclectic team of unlikely hackers, each with their own strengths and quirks. The city's atmosphere shapes how you lose time in the game. London's dystopian vibe just feels alive, even if the people are digital. There's this scrappy, underground resistance movement pulse that gets more apparent as you recruit folks. Each member of your crew directly affects how missions unfold. Need brute force? Send in your bare-knuckle brawler. Prefer a more subtle approach? There's a stealthy hacker with a spider drone for that. What really sticks, though, is the unpredictability. The procedural system means no two characters, or even situations, feel exactly the same. You might find yourself playing as a construction worker 1 minute, summoning a cargo drone to lift you across the city, and infiltrating a high-security building the next, with an elderly spy jammed into a Ferrari. That's the addictive core. It's not just the mission designs or the open-world systems, but the sheer choice you get. You end up getting attached to your ragtag group of misfits, not because of some deep backstory, but because you built them. You made them work together. Up next is Steelrising. Now, Steelrising takes a very different approach. It's immediately striking, set in an alternate history of the French Revolution, but with something like automaton soldiers. You're controlling Aegis, this mechanical warrior built to serve a queen, but the thing is, you're pretty much a one-person uprising fighting through Paris, dismantling heavily armed robots. Mechanically, it follows a formula familiar to anyone who's into Souls-like games. Dodging, parrying, tight swings. It's all about mastering the mechanics until they become second nature. Where Steelrising stands apart is not just the setting, though that is a big part of the appeal. Paris, in this steampunk reimagination, feels cold, industrial, and dangerous. Every street, palace, and alley has this looming darkness over it, with threats waiting at nearly every turn. Yet, the scope is elegant instead of chaotic. You feel purposeful as you wear down armored automata with precise, deliberate attacks. There's weight behind every sword swing, like you're learning through failure, until you finally master your opponent's patterns. Something I didn't expect going in was the variety in combat depth. Aegis can equip all kinds of tools, from long-range guns to whips and elemental weapons. Every choice in combat feels meticulously crafted. Each weapon changes your rhythm, and that gets addictively challenging. You'll find yourself retrying fights just to experiment with different builds, knowing that figuring out the right weapon and strategy is the key to victory. The tension makes it impossible to stop, because improvement feels like an accomplishment every time you make it just a bit further in this revolutionary hellscape. And to finally conclude this list, we have Hellpoint. With Hellpoint, we're diving deep into the grim and cosmic. If you've ever wondered what Dark Souls would feel like in a sci-fi, Lovecraftian setting, this is your answer. The game drops you into an abandoned space station called Irid Novo, orbiting a black hole, and it's every bit as spooky and hostile as that sounds. There's this slow, creeping dread throughout as you explore the station's massive halls, where everything, from the environment to the enemies, feels like it's been warped by some kind of otherworldly force. Where it grabs you is through that cosmic setting, dilapidated Gothic architecture merged with cold space machinery. There's this eerie loneliness mixed with chaos that worms its way into your playtime. It has all the familiar notes of a Souls-like system: strategic combat, lots of heavy strafing, and perfect dodges, timed attacks, but it mixes things up with its sci-fi elements. For example, weapons can get infused with crazy cosmic abilities, and you're not just smashing with swords, you're also wielding strange devices infused with whatever twisted energy the black hole is pumping out. The black hole, by the way, changes more than just the visuals. It directly influences the enemies and environment. It's almost like the cosmic forces are watching over you, waiting for the right moment to unleash harder enemy variants or secret pathways that only open under certain celestial conditions. And that is the true kicker. You're constantly kept on edge because every playthrough feels a little bit different depending on how you manage these cosmic cycles. The deeper you get into Irid Novo, the more you feel trapped in this grim cosmic nightmare. Each time you think you've conquered an area, something twists again, pulling you deeper into this bizarre collision of science and horrors. And there you have it, folks. If any of these games have you itching to dive in for hours on end, let me know in the comments which one grabbed your attention the most. And hey, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.